Welcome to a Telltale Books video. I'm Greg,
And I'm Emily.
and we're talking about the next in our Robert A. Heinlein series, a short novel that he wrote. It's his second novel, although both of his first novels were quite short, what you would
Mm-hmm.
people today would consider it a novella.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even call it a novel.
Mm-hmm.
But they are considered novels in his bibliography. And this is his 11th work overall, published in 1941. It was serialized in Astounding Science Fiction, and it is titled Sixth Column. It was serialized in the January, February, and March issues, and
You have those ones?
I have a January and February. I'm waiting for the March right now.
Nice.
February conveniently. I
That's
do
so
have the
cool.
January issue right here,
Very
and
cool.
it's a little fragile, but
That is very
um,
cool.
absolutely. And I'll put a big thing on the screen
It's the
covering up Emily.
Colossus on it.
Sorry.
It has the Colossus on it.
Yeah.
I love it. So
Um,
good.
a very, very beautiful cover illustration by Hubert Rogers, one of my favorite illustrators of the 40s, and definitely an excellent illustration on the cover of the
Yeah.
magazine.
Yeah.
So he did get the cover, and there's some pretty good illustrations inside. I don't know if you saw, if you
No.
tried the PDF at all. Let's see if I
No,
can
I didn't
open
try the
this
PDF.
carefully.
You gave me a chapter book version of it that I read.
Okay, this I
Look at
love
this here.
this illustration,
Ooh, that is
and again I'll
beautiful.
put this up on screen. Isn't it cool?
That is so
Entering into the
beautiful.
temple.
Oh,
So, um, Heinlein's second novel, published, of course, in Astounding, where so far he's published almost everything
mm-hmm.
that he published at this point. It has an alternate title if you're looking for it. It's often titled The Day After Tomorrow, and this is a 1970s Signet paperback
Okay.
edition. And I kind of paged through. I didn't read it page for page, but I kind of looked through, and it looks like this is unlike other Heinlein works.
Mm-hmm.
This one is not rewritten from the Astounding Stories
Okay.
version, so
And I
it's
think
pretty
mine
accurate.
was as well, from what I understand. But
Okay.
so, funny story. I put it on top of The Last American, which was another video that we have coming up here, or that we have on the channel. And I put it on a pile with all the books I was going to bring over. It's gone. It's
Really?
just gone. It just I don't know where it went. I don't know if the kids, like the cats, I call them my kids,
Hmm.
absconded with it somewhere or knocked it somewhere. I looked under all the furniture where it
Oh
was.
no,
It's
they're
just
starting their own religion
missing. No, they're starting their own religion.
and
Jeez.
taking over your house.
They're starting their own book club. That's not the book I want them to start with. No.
No.
Anyway, are you ready for a synopsis?
Sure, go for
I
it.
am going to verbally disclaim right now I want to like this story, but it is so incredibly racist.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a really interesting plot. It's an interesting idea. There's so much good about it, except it's so incredibly racist.
But I think you got to take that in context, okay?
Yes,
This is
absolutely.
January 1941.
Yes.
Okay, by December, we were at war with Japan.
Yes.
Um,
So this is very anti-Asian
yeah,
literature.
there was a lot of things going on. And of course, in 1941, America was just racist in general.
Yes. Yes. It was
We
very
we made up
racist.
we made
We were
up
scared of the
nasty names
communists.
about everybody. Italians had bad names, Irish had bad names.
Germans sucked.
Yeah,
Everyone
Germans
sucked.
had
Yeah.
bad names. The blacks had bad names. We had
Mm-hmm.
bad names for the Chinese and bad names for the Japanese. We were just the kings of racism
Being
in the United
absolutely
States of
racist.
America. And, Heinlein was a product of his time.
Yes, absolutely. So you do have to go into it with that understanding that you are going to encounter some very anti-Asian,
Yeah.
general racism.
But then the other thing
Mm-hmm.
you have to remember with that is that if we had somebody march in here and take us over,
Hmm.
we're not going to be nice about it.
No,
We're not
absolutely
gonna,
not. We're going to be
we're not
extremely
going to be
bitter.
nice to them.
Yes.
We're gonna call them nasty names.
Yes.
We're
So it
gonna hate
is,
them.
yes, yes, I absolutely get that. However, the only other thing that I've noticed in this book is he was using the term American and Caucasian interchangeably.
Hmm.
So in his mind and in this story, America was white.
Which it mostly
Very,
was.
yeah, very much white, with
Hmm.
one character who is a minority who was an American who came from Asia, and
Yeah.
he happens to be on their side because the Asians killed his whole family.
And that's another
Yeah.
redeeming fact of the story is that the reality when we went to war with Japan, we rounded up all the Japanese Americans and put them in internment camps,
Hmm.
basically concentration camps.
Yeah.
We just didn't have gas ovens.
Yes.
Heinlein instead has his characters trusting the Asian American
Hmm.
and
Of course, they put him through
utilize,
interrogation, but
yeah,
to be safe.
but they trusted him because he was an American.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
they weren't racist towards him. They put him in an important position, and he became a very important
Yes.
character in the
And
progress of the
he
story.
absolutely was. They took into account his whole story
Hmm.
versus just his race, which
Yeah,
is redeeming for that reason.
which is way
But the
better than
rest of
what
it, yeah,
Americans actually did
yeah,
um, 11 months later.
yeah. So personally, I had a lot of inner conflict about this, but enough about that. Disclaimer over. You will run into some anti-Asian, very anti-Asian terminology and references in this story. So the whole premise of this story is America has basically been taken over by the culture called the Pan-Asians, which I'm assuming is probably China, because in the synopsis on the back of the book it said that America is basically the last nation of free men.
Hmm.
So basically China has started taking over all its relating and touching land masses, reintegrating and taking over the culture, making them all communist, and then just kept heading westward.
Well, that's a little confusing because in the book,
Mm-hmm.
Heinlein has the characters state that it isn't specifically Japan or China that
Yeah.
makes up Pan Asian.
Yeah.
So you really don't get a definition of who the Pan Asians
Yes.
are.
So at some point, an Asian country, and I'm just assuming it's China because China was the largest landmass and would have the largest army at
Yeah.
the time.
Hmm.
Um, I'm assuming so some Asian country has started taking over the world essentially and
Hmm.
absorbing other Asian countries surrounding it.
Hmm.
Um, so they're referred to as the Pan Asians. They've come to America. They've killed basically or put the government into hiding, killed off a lot of important people,
I think it's
and
North Korea.
overthrew.
They kick our asses.
Yeah, North Korea kicked our ass. Who knows? But so they've come into our country, come into the United States, and they've basically taken over everything and have enslaved the Americans. And then there's a place in America that was highly secure and entirely secret, including to most government officials, called the Citadel. And when one of the lieutenants comes, or I can't, majors, one of the majors comes in,
Yeah.
to relay information that he got from Washington, D.C., which has been wiped out by the time he arrives.
Hmm.
He comes and there's only 7 men left, like including himself, 7 men left.
Hmm.
And this had been a facility of over 200 scientists and military personnel.
Hmm.
And so he asks, what happened? And the scientists reiterate that there was a scientist who came into this whole scenario who was coming up with some kind of weaponized material, but when he activated it, it killed a majority of the team except these few for some reason.
Hmm.
So basically he's like, "All right, I'm general now. Like I'm taking over. We need to figure out what that thing is and how to weaponize it and how to utilize it to get against, go against the Pan Asians and get America back. I need you scientists to come together and figure that out. Who can we use for military personnel?" One of the military personnel was basically sworn in because he wandered in one day by accident, because he was a tramp or a nomadic person. He was
Hmm.
basically a Bilbo, a hobo,
Homo.
hillbilly, blah 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 blah. Insert me,
Bilbo is from
Bilbo Baggins.
yeah, Lord of the Rings. He doesn't
Bilbo
show up.
Hobo. No, where is my brain today? Um. So anyway, one of the guys gets sworn in as military personnel because he just wanders in. He's a tramp. He's a
Mm-hmm.
train hopping hobo.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just swear him in. And at one point, they start asking, the general starts asking people's talents, what they're responsible for, what they can take over so that they can run the facility. And they find out that the hobo used to be a lawyer who
Mm-hmm.
was trying to do some work to figure out one of his potential clients who was a tramp and try to figure out his lifestyle. And then just never went back. He just
Yeah.
loved being a free man so much. He
Mm-hmm.
just became a professional hobo.
Mm-hmm.
So he was telling the general, "Oh, I have, we have this underground. I bet hobos aren't going to get captured as easily by the Pan Asians.
Right.
I could do some reconnaissance and see if I can figure out what's going on the outside and
Mm-hmm.
relay that information to you." And so the general, now general, was like, "Sure, we'll send you out." So the hobo goes out, has some relationships that he rebuilds, finds this other gentleman that we mentioned before who was the Asian American who had come over. His family did like wine vineyards or something like
Yeah.
that, or some kind of alcohol based thing. And when the Pan Asians came, they killed his whole family and called him a traitor and basically set him to be homeless and stuff like that and to suffer in their culture with having had his family killed in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
So he recruits him, comes back with all this information, and the things he's found out is basically, yes, the government's overthrown. Everybody has to have an ID card and have their job relayed to them. There is no organized form of communication, so all newspapers, everything is either completely dismantled and everything is now written in the Asian language,
Yeah.
whatever that language ends up being, because it's
Mm-hmm.
probably a conglomerate of things.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that the Asians are allowing that people still do is to gather in en masse at all is religion for the sake of their morale.
Right.
So that's what he comes back to the general with. And while
Mm-hmm.
he's away for a couple weeks, the scientists are able to figure out that what the other scientists had been working on was something that was able to do transmutation and basically adjust matter, has the ability to do a lot of other things too, mind
Yeah.
control, all kinds of stuff. So this is like a super weapon.
Yeah, it's really more like the kind of weapons they had in the 1930s where they just invent some imaginary ray that can do absolutely everything the heroes need to
Yes.
defeat the bad guys.
And that is absolutely what this is. It is a ray
Yeah.
that does it all. So they're able to tweak it and make it do all kinds of cool things and adjustments and stuff like that. So they start planning, trying to just basically, the six of them go in guns blazing and start taking out a high up official, the nearest one possible. So as they're planning this military operation, about 2 days before execution, there had been an uprising of Americans against one of the generals in their area,
Hmm.
of the Pan Asians. And so there was an uprising. They managed to kill and like harm a bunch of people, but eventually there's just too many Pan Asians around and too many other military personnel that are present. They get caught, they get executed. One of their officials ends up getting killed by them. So, as retribution, 100,000 Americans are instantly killed. Like, they just slaughter them all.
Hmm.
And it's based off a random lottery.
Hmm.
So, that makes the American general sit there and realize we can't go in guns blazing one at a time. We need something that is a nationwide movement everywhere at once.
Hmm.
Because if we do this like this, they're going to start picking off Americans in this manner
Hmm.
and start having this retribution thing where we're going to have thousands of thousands of thousands of people killed to make an example of those who rose up. And it's
Hmm.
going to completely eliminate American morale.
Yeah.
So he's sitting there trying to figure out what the hell can we do to organize something nationwide to get everybody on board that's going to go under the radar of the Pan Asians. And then he's like, wait a minute, we could start a religion. And like, the Pan Asians don't understand American religions or the melting pot that America is, so another religion popping up wouldn't be that highly suspect.
No.
So they basically spend time branding and building a religion and
Hmm.
start organizing the religious front and how that's going to integrate into the military operation. and who to bring in and who not to. So the rest of the story is them building this brand, recruiting other priests to go into other parts of the nation and build a church, get people part of the military operation, put up a front for those they suspect are spies to make them continue thinking it's a church, and put them in positions of power in the church. And then they just use their little raise to mind control the Pan Asians. So anytime somebody gets arrested, nobody ends up in jail.
Right.
They always have money because they can just make it with their special ray.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the time came, and like the Pan Asians would try to like get into their churches to do searches and stuff. If they entered the building, they had the rays set at the front door that anyone who was not Caucasian couldn't enter the building without passing out
Mm-hmm.
or getting killed
Mm-hmm.
potentially. And they just would say, "Oh, it's because our God won't let you in. Only we can do this. Like only
Yeah.
true believers of Mota, the god, if that's the name of the god, can come into this space, or people who genuinely believe or genuinely need help, and you guys don't need help." And
Mm-hmm.
so the whole rest of the story is them going through the process of setting up this religion and then executing the overthrow of the Pan Asian takeover.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just really well done.
Yeah.
Like, we both come from a branding and graphic design background, and that was impressive how they
Mm-hmm.
set that up.
Mm-hmm.
It was impressive how they integrated it into a military operation. Also, kind of scary and horrifying that they could build a cult that fast,
Mm-hmm.
because it could happen that fast,
Well, you
and
know,
has probably.
there's aspects of this that are just for entertainment purposes.
Yes.
They're not total. It's not a totally realistic
No.
thing that this could actually be done,
No.
especially since the science behind it is really just magic.
Yes. Essentially, they're trying to make it look like magic. Yeah.
Well, I
And
mean,
vice versa.
there's no, unlike other Heinlein works, there's no real science basis for
Yeah, it's
what
kind of
he comes up with.
ambiguous. Yeah, he
It's
doesn't.
it's a plot device to allow this whole thing to happen, but
Yes.
it could not be implemented in the real world.
Hmm. But the way they start doing systematic bringing in of people
Yeah.
and the means by which they use, like the money and being able to care for the poor and the needy and get people who are at their worst and that sort of thing and bring them into
Mhm.
the fold, so to speak, is a common theme that a lot of cults use. If anybody listens to the podcast cast Cults, fascinating podcast, by the way, but it talks a lot about this and how they try to get people at their worst or people who are desperate for money or like at the end of the ropes essentially and exploit that
Yeah.
in a lot of regards, or people who deal with a lot of depression or mental illness is who they target first.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what they were doing too, except we're going to target people who are at their lowest, but we want people who do marketing. We want magazine salesmen. We want lawyers. We want anyone who's done customer service and can sweet talk anybody.
Yeah.
We want people who can memorize our theology to the best of their ability and make it sound nice.
Hmm.
You know, that kind of thing. So it was really interesting.
And
Like,
that's my favorite quote from this is I forget exactly when this was, but
mm-hmm,
one or who the characters were, but one of the characters is being sent out to try and make a statement to try and smooth the situation over.
mm-hmm,
And he says, and he's being told he needs to make some kind of public speech. And he says, what sort of remark? And the general says, just priestly mumbo jumbo, impressive and no real meaning. Can you do it? I think so. I used to sell magazine subscriptions.
yeah,
I thought that was hilarious.
yep. Yeah, and so that's the kind of people they try to get, though. Like, if
Mhm.
you ever, the miniseries Waco, too, kind of goes into that.
Okay.
Really charming people were what attracted people to the Branch Davidians,
Yeah.
specifically David Koresh
Well,
and his
that's,
charisma.
yeah, the charisma aspect, that's how the Nazis came to power.
Yep.
That's always a factor in all of those kinds of movements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody having charisma, sounding really good, being able to talk you on into a corner,
Hmm.
and then just get you to give up and come on in
And
to the
so in
fold.
this case, the impressive thing is this device they've invented.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come up with these headpieces that
Look like
cause a
halos.
halo to form on their
Yes.
head through some tricks of light.
Yeah, they have these
It's
gorgeous robes, and
yeah.
all of their buildings are like a perfect square with particular color coordination,
Hmm.
and building this perfect square of an altar and all this stuff. The branding's quite impressive.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so eventually it works. It works out. There's a cool part with the Colossus that they're able to like
Yeah.
build with their ray gun things or whatever,
Yeah. They make
which is what
disappear.
this illustration
That's what the
indicates here.
illustration's for.
And their staffs are all like the devices are in their staffs, which are basically those little boxes there at the end of the
Hmm.
staff of this Colossus.
Hmm.
Really interesting stuff. So, again, a really great story, but as a person and who is very anti-racist, it was a really hard read. I
Yeah.
get that it's wartime. You're gonna see the enemy as the enemy and that sort of thing, and when there's a hostile takeover, nobody's gonna feel good about it. But like they use like they call them flat faces and
Hmm.
the yellow enemy like the yellow devil and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's like oh, but that's stuff that they call people now just to be dicks. So that
Yeah.
was kind of
But
hard for me to
well,
read through.
in 1941, what you had going on was a lot of propaganda,
Of
gas
course.
stations, and
Yeah.
so people's heads were being filled with that kind of crap
Yeah,
in
and
America.
we kind of saw it again because of COVID too, with
Yeah.
everything coming from over from China. You saw an increase in
But
Asian
a
racism.
lot of the media during World War II and actually leading up to
Mm-hmm.
it, a lot of the media was doing this very, you know, America positive
Mm-hmm.
propaganda in their stories. Amazing Stories had issues that had science fiction stories about heroes that went into war
Mm-hmm.
and beat the Nazis. You had a lot of that kind of crap going on,
Yeah.
and that was intentional to try to mobilize the entire nation behind the war effort
Yes.
because we had to.
Yes. And with all that understanding, I get it. It still was no easy read for me.
Yeah,
Despite how good the
today it
story
makes it
was, like
very.
this would easily be.
I mean,
Yeah.
if only Heinlein were still alive and could rewrite it to make
Hmm.
it aliens
I
invading.
know. I literally was like just in my mind instead of saying Pan Asians, I was just saying aliens
Something
because it would
that
make
simple
yeah.
would make the story palatable to today's audiences. But
Yes.
because it is
It is yeah,
of its time and
a culture
chooses
that
to
exists
target a
sort of
specific
people group.
culture in the world, it
Hmm.
now would piss a lot of people off to try and read this story.
Yeah.
And for that reason, we can't give it top two.
No.
If,
And
some simple changes, and we probably could,
yes, but
because
otherwise, it was actually quite an entertaining story and a really
yeah, it was
interesting
written kind of
concept.
tongue in cheek,
Mm-hmm.
so not very seriously. He
Yeah.
was, just having fun with this story,
Mm-hmm.
and
And I loved that their religion was like basically, it's like, really, we just want our religion to enforce all the other religions, so anybody like could come and be
hmm.
a follower of Mota because it's not against anyone else's theology. Like kind of being a
Hmm.
Buddhist. Like you can be a Buddhist and a Christian at the same time because Buddhism often integrates a practice. Whereas Christianity is a theology and a belief value system. And I mean, they can integrate because they work so well together. And that's basically what they were trying to brand their religion to
Hmm.
as something that could integrate with just about anything. It's like just be nice to people, take care of the poor, heal the sick, which they were doing miraculously with their ray gun. Like people were getting terminal cancer and they just cured them.
Hmm.
Like,
And I feel like Heinlein was subtly poking fun at religions of his day
mm-hmm.
by describing this religion they created as only for white people.
Yeah.
And they're using their ray to back that up, saying that the god Mota will strike them down if they try to enter
Mm-hmm.
the citadel,
Excuse me.
and that you know other Mota had like seven different aspects,
Yes.
and there were other aspects of Moda that were the gods for other races.
And
But
yeah, in
Moda
other
was
religions and
specifically
yeah,
white man's
the
god.
white man's
And
god.
and I just kind of feel that was kind of poking fun at some of the Christians that are kind of racist.
Yeah. Well, I think of a particular part of American Gods, where the book American Gods, where basically it's like they had white Jesus, they had Mexican Jesus, they they had black Jesus. Like they just had all these versions of Jesus, and that's
Mhm.
kind of what they were doing here
Mhm.
too. It's like this one's our white people god, that
Yeah.
one's for the other gods.
But I feel like Heinlein did that specifically to poke fun at some of the people in his day that were
Mm-hmm.
very racist.
Yes. Yes. And so, but it is an interesting read. It's a good read. It's if you can look past the propaganda and as long as you don't take to heart the racism, which is hard to do.
Hmm.
It's actually an interesting story.
Hmm.
Though it's not something I would recommend for young minds.
No.
Because I could see them taking that way too seriously.
Yeah, well, and you really do have to understand the history and
Yeah.
society of America in 1941 in
Yeah.
order to make it through this story. If
Yeah.
you don't, it's just going to be very, very offensive.
Yeah. And yeah, to work through this book, you have to be able to get beyond that. But
Hmm.
other than that, it's quite an interesting social commentary on American culture, on religion, on military, tactics
And
that
even
can
on
and
science
could
to
be used.
some
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah, to the science a little bit. Interesting commentary on separation of church and state.
Yeah,
So there's a lot that you can get
but
out of
people always
this.
get that
I
backwards.
know.
Separation of church and state was set up because people came to the New World to get away from religious persecution
Mm-hmm.
by their governments.
Yes.
So we wanted to set up this country where people could practice their religion without persecution from the government.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you have separation of church and
Yes, it is
state,
to
not the other
protect,
way around.
yes, and it is to protect both the government and the church from each other
Yeah.
because that can get messy. Um, but yeah, so it is a really interesting continuous social commentary. Um, but yeah, just full disclosure, super anti-Asian.
Hmm.
So, it is what it is. So, take it with a grain of salt if you will read it. Don't recommend it to people if you think they're going to be super offended by it. I'm not recommending it for kids.
Hmm.
You really need a lot of context to find this story interesting, but otherwise, really fascinating novel.
Yeah.
And,
And sometimes if a work of art doesn't piss you off, it's not great art. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Sometimes it
It
needs
should,
to
yeah.
affect.
Like, I feel justified in feeling like I hate how anti-Asian this is, but I understand the context that it
Hmm.
builds. But it takes a strong mind to be able to work through that and past it. And I also have to take into account I'm a white person.
Yeah.
I'm not offended but because I'm Asian. I'm offended because I don't want anybody to be treated like that.
Hmm.
But you also have to come into it with a lot of plausible deniability in a lot of different ways
Hmm.
in order to actually enjoy the story. So,
Yes.
but yeah, it's good.
Hmm.
It's not the worst thing I've ever read.
Not for the
Just
faint of heart,
yeah,
though.
not for the faint of heart. There's gonna be some really stuff, and religious people probably wouldn't recommend this to
No,
them
no. If you're
if you're really
very
religious.
religious, you should not read
Yeah,
this.
so really controversial work, but there are some pretty entertaining parts and very interesting commentary it makes
Yes.
for all its faults.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'd recommend it otherwise. So
Okay.
if you've got a good strong mind and think for yourself, I think you can handle this just fine.
And it's another one where a really good author today could take this
Yeah.
basic story and just remove the racism and turn it into an amazing current day work that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
would not be so offensive racially, but would still get
Mm-hmm.
across the same great story.
Yes. I think this is a really interesting good versus evil story that could be really,
Hmm.
really well thought out
Hmm.
and really well adapted. So, but yeah, I don't have anything else to say about it.
No.
Like, it's pretty, you kind of have to read it to know. And you have to be willing, and the only thing we can really do to tell you if it's good or not is just really make you aware it's super racist.
Yeah.
That there's not a ton of science, but it is fun. It is a fun adventure
Hmm.
beyond those things.
Hmm.
So, That's so much conflict saying that because it's just so racist.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah, that's all I gotta say about it.
Okay. So, have you read Sixth Column or The Day After Tomorrow? Tell us what you think in the comments section. We would like to hear your thoughts about this book,
Hmm.
and put them in the video comments for everyone to see and be able to think about. And otherwise, uh, our next Robert Heinlein will be one of the, I think this was the first Robert Heinlein story I read,
Mm.
and the one that really blew me away. His next story published was the next month. Actually, the second installment of Six Column.
Hmm.
And I forgot to mention, Six Column was published under his pseudonym of Anson MacDonald. And the reason is that in the February issue, where part two was published in Astounding, he published a story called And He Built a Crooked House
Ah,
under
okay.
his own name.
Hmm.
And the magazine had the um, standard rule that you can't have two stories by the same author in one issue. So
Aha, the
that's
loophole.
why the Anson MacDonald um, pseudonym. But
Hmm.
I think everybody knew who Anson MacDonald was
Yeah.
already. So it's just a um, thing to get around the rules.
Yes, the loopholes.
So that and also, well, the March issue where part three was, he published a story called Logic of Empire.
Hmm.
So I mean, he was just filling Astounding
Cranking them out like a
great
machine.
stories at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, cranking them out.
And so we will be back with Andy Built a Crooked House and a lot more other Robert Heinlein to come as we go through these. And so we hope you'll come back and join us for those. In the meantime, I hope you hit the like button and the subscribe button so you know when all these videos show up on our channel.
So thanks for joining us, guys. Again, comment, like, subscribe. Please be respectful in your comments, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.